Lee Grant was nominated for her first Oscar in 1951. After 2 days, her name was listed in a government book. Her name was put on a blacklist. Her phone was tapped, and the FBI followed her around. The strain tore her marriage apart. She purchased food by pawning her valuables. She couldn't work on TV or movies for 12 years. Her salary fell from $75,000 to $4,000. She utilized fictitious names to get by and taught acting in secret. She was no longer young when Hollywood allowed her to return. However, her narrative didn't end there. The fact that she is still directing at the age of 99 will astound you. Lyova Haskell Rosenthal, the real name of Lee Grant, was born in Manhattan on October 31, 1925. Her parents were Jewish immigrants from Russia who had fled Odessa's horrific brutality. Lydia, her mother, and her sister had escaped, leaving behind relatives who probably never survived. They moved into a tiny flat at the intersection of 148th Street and Riverside after arriving in New York with nothing. Abraham, her father, worked tirelessly as a teacher and realtor, struggling to survive the Great Depression with the family. Even Abraham's own Polish Orthodox parents disapproved of his marriage to Witya, which made everything even more difficult because of how tense things were. Lee's age was always a mystery. It was occasionally recorded as 1925 or 1931, as was typical of immigrant families without official documentation. Regardless of the year, her talent was evident from the start. She appeared on one of the biggest stages in the world, the Metropolitan Opera, in 1931 at the age of 4. She portrayed Laura Colo's abducted princess. While most children her age were still learning how to speak in complete phrases, she was performing with well-known singers. She received a scholarship to the local playhouse as a result of that performance, which would influence the rest of her life. Behind the cheers, there was a lot of pressure in her home. In order to support Lee, her mother Witya sacrificed everything and encouraged her to enroll in acting, ballet, and opera classes simultaneously. Like other kids, Lee wasn't playing. She was always on stage, performing. The more years went by, the more her mother's expectations became. In an attempt to get her kid to participate in blackface at school, Witya once made her do it. When Lee was just 10 years old, her mother's mental state totally broke down. Lee discovered her after a terrible suicide attempt and called for assistance. She could not forget that moment. Lee had another high point at 11. As one of the youngest dancers accepted to the American Ballet Theatre, she joined the company. But it was short-lived. Too quickly, her body started to change. Overnight, she got taller. A career in ballet might be ended by losing a few inches in a matter of months. She started to lose all she had trained for, and she became too tall to be paired with male dancers. Her dance dreams were the family's greatest hope. They were at a loss for what to do with that door closed. They weren't wealthy. In their small Bronx apartment, Lee practiced on the fire escape. As much as he could, her father worked. It was insufficient, though. They were supported by New Deal initiatives. Lee occasionally went hungry before bed. By the time she was 12, she was being paid to act, sing, and dance while her friends attended school. Rent, utilities, and food were all covered by her salary. She was deprived of a typical upbringing, and the resulting wounds would last a lifetime. Her name was changed to Lee Grant when she was 17. She desired to integrate into the world of Broadway and move on from her past. Joy to the World was her first major part, which she landed in 1948. Despite having no formal theatrical experience, she was able to cope under pressure, which startled critics. She trained under Sandy Meisner at the neighborhood playhouse at the age of 16, and at the age of 4, she had previously appeared in the Met Opera. Her mother had encouraged her to pursue art lessons, ballet, opera, and even Juilliard after high school. She went to the detective story audition in 1949. She didn't want to play the youthful female, even though she was just 22. Instead, she requested to read for the shoplifter, who was 40 years old. Her inspiration for the character's voice came from girls she'd heard on buses in New York. She was dressed in an 18-inch brown jumper from a different show. That brave decision transformed her life and earned her the Critics' Circle Award. She later trained at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg, practicing Stanislavski-inspired method acting. She co-starred with Kirk Douglas in the 1951 film adaptation of Detective Story. At the age of 25, she received her first nomination for an Oscar. She married the screenwriter Arnold Menoff in 1951. He had a connection to the Communist Party, something that she never really accepted or understood. They had first connected through one of his plays, but when Lee paid tribute to actor J. When the government was blamed for Edward Bromberg's death during his funeral, everything changed. A leaflet was given to her 2 days later. There was her name. Red Channels has called her a communist sympathizer. Her name was put on a blacklist. Her career in Hollywood terminated at the age of 24. From 1952 to 1964, she was prohibited from both film and television for the following 12 years. Her choice to withhold identities from the House Un-American Activities Committee cost her everything. She was well known in early television even before she was placed on the blacklist. She appeared in Search for Tomorrow in 1953 as Rose Peabody. She might have tainted the soup at the end of each show, which added suspense. When a Syracuse store owner sent a postcard to CBS accusing her of being a communist, Don Knotts, who had been playing her silent brother, lost his job as well. In an instant, she lost her job. Controversy was not what advertisers wanted. She first visited Hollywood in 1950 for her film debut, where she witnessed a more sinister side of the business. She had personal experience with the pervasive misogyny in the studio system. The producers' proposals were inappropriate. By 1930, only 20% of casts were female, compared to 40% in 1920. Warner Brothers, Paramount, MGM, Fox, and RKO were the 5 major studios that held the most of the authority. Lee resisted giving in, regardless of the consequences. She received Best Actress for Detective Story at the Cannes Film Festival in 1952. But the burden of the blacklist overshadowed that honor. She still had a bad reputation. She is unable to work. Her voice was silenced. She had nothing to do but wait. She found employment wherever she could throughout those years. Little theatrical productions using fictitious names. Her results remained impressive. Her passion was not lost on critics. Raw, emotive improvisations were a hallmark of her early Broadway career. She stunned everyone by letting loose a wild side during an acting practice when she was just 17. She never forgot that spark or that moment. She didn't accept parts that were easy. She consistently chose the challenging ones, the ones that hurt, and the ones with layers. She still had more issues in the 1950s, even when she went back to performing on series like The Goldbergs. Despite earning significantly less than male actors, she had equal billing. It was a real pay disparity. Networks also stopped airing shows with Jewish or ethnic actors when the Red Scare struck because they were too dangerous. To be cautious, they canceled certain shows. She appeared on Broadway in Stalag 17 in 1953. In addition to the plot, that play gained notoriety for what transpired behind the scenes. Jose Ferrer was a difficult director. He had conflicts with actors. Full of her own ideas and skilled in method acting, Lee resisted. Their arguments revealed something more profound, but they also became the subject of Broadway rumors. Lee Grant had no intention of compromising. When everything went wrong, Lee Grant was only 23 years old. She had recently received her first Oscar nomination for her performance in Detective Story alongside Kirk Douglas in April 1951. Everyone in Hollywood believed she was going to be a big star. She was unable to attend the ceremony, however, since her name was included in a government report that listed those suspected of being communists. Arnold Manoff, her spouse, was the cause. The House Un-American Activities Committee was informed by a director called Edward Demetric that Manoff had been a member of the Communist Party. Lee wouldn't say anything against him. Their marriage had always been troubled by his politics, which she didn't even know about, but she insisted it didn't matter. Along with 150 other names, hers was now included in a book called Red Channels. Her career was just getting started when she was blacklisted and prohibited from speaking on TV and in films. The consequences arrived quickly. Desire was the trolley in which she had been cast. Among the decade's greatest plays. Overnight, however, the producers took her out. She didn't even have time to say goodbye or protest. Unexpectedly, her studio contracts were terminated. She was the next big thing one day and untouchable the next. People ceased phoning. The projects vanished. She had one of the brightest prospects in Hollywood, according to Kirk Douglas, and it was taken from her. Everything that transpired in a few days was the erasure of her. The FBI began to investigate her. They tapped her phone. To track her and hear her chats, they dispatched people. She felt like someone was always listening, even when she and her daughter Dinah were at home. Her marriage began to break down. The surveillance pressure made everything seem risky. She has no one to trust. Trying to live while being observed all the time, she claimed, was like dancing on a pin. There was always tension and worry. The situation worsened by 1953. She and Arnold had been placed on a blacklist. They were not making any money. Manoff was forced to write under the fictitious name Joel Carpenter. He made relatively little even then. He contributed writing to series such as The Defenders, Naked City, and You Are There. Dinah needed food, so Lee pawned her jewelry to pay for it. In an effort to help one another, they shared a little building with other blacklisted families. Lee provided acting lessons and took on tiny acting jobs under false pretenses in order to get money. Though it was insignificant in comparison to her previous film revenue, she made just enough to get by. She was past her peak. When she should have been a rising star, she referred to those years as her ingenue years. And they lived in destitution. She felt the stress. Following her House Un-American Activities Committee interview, she experienced memory issues. She had close friends whose names she couldn't recall. There was always damage. She battled with it even decades later. She later stated that she was eventually forced to examine the trauma when she wrote her memoir, I Said Yes to Everything. She came to see that she was broken by more than simply the blacklist. It was the psychological harm it inflicted, the embarrassment, the silence, and the terror. Her brain was rewired by it. She created a makeshift acting school in her Manhattan flat in order to make ends meet. During 1951 to 1963, she had 15 to 20 pupils every week. Her fee was $25 per session. The Oscar-winning Sandy Dennis was her first pupil. Lee filled her students in on the blacklist's destructive effects, dishonest executives, and couch casting. Her candor turned the class into a legend. She made between $300 and $400 a month, which was hardly enough to support Dinah. But it saved their lives. She was eventually asked to study at HB Studio, which also included well-known students like Maureen Stapleton. In 1960, she and Arnold Manoff's marriage eventually fell apart. For 9 years, they had been together. He had 3 children from previous marriages, Eva, Michael, and Tommy. Lee believed she was supporting her spouse, therefore she joined the Communist Party as a result. However, she discovered that even as they were fighting for their lives, he was having affairs. Her annual salary as a teacher was under $1,200 at one point. In 1964, they finalized their divorce. At the age of 50, Manoff passed away from a heart attack in February 1965, 1 year later. She always thought that the blacklist stress killed him. She began going to treatment in 1961. She was sobbing. 3 times a week, her treatments cost $45, nearly half of her income. She made payments of almost $3,000 over 18 months. She discovered, however, why she consistently accepted powerful guys. She had immigrant parents. Her father showed no emotion. She had always sought acceptance. Through therapy, she was able to confront her suffering and disentangle her past from her present. Additionally, it paved the way for her future work in mental health films. She continued performing even in the toughest years. The period she performed on stage was 1951 until 1964. Performers on the blacklist were protected by Actors' Equity. She made $55 each week performing on shows including A Hole in the Head, Wedding Breakfast, and Arms and the Man. At times, she performed 6 nights a week. Her performance in The Maids earned her an Obie Award in 1965. She gained directing skills while working at the Actors Studio as well. She survived with the support of her theater buddies. They were all in the same battle, they knew. Before the blacklist, her salary was $75,000, but by 1962, it had fallen to only $4,000. In order to avoid being evicted, she traveled to Europe and accepted modest TV jobs in Italy and the UK that paid between $500 and $800 per episode. She worked covertly under false pretenses. In 1963, she even underwent a facelift in the hopes that appearing younger would help her land gigs. She felt alienated in her own field, however, and as though she no longer belonged in the nation that had once welcomed her. In 1964, her exile was finally over. Her attorney performed a favor for a member of the House Un-American Activities Committee. Her name was cleared by that. She played Stella Cernick in 71 episodes of Peyton Place after being cast in 1965. She finally allowed everything she had been suppressing come out in that role. It earned her an Emmy in 1966. Of all the actors in the cast, she was the only one to win. When Frank Sinatra approached her, he said, "You deserve it, kid." For the first time, she felt secure in Hollywood once more. She and Sidney Poitier co-starred in the 1967 film In the Heat of the Night. Having recently lost Manoff to a heart attack, she played the emotionally charged character of Mrs. Colbert. In the movie, she expresses her genuine anguish when Poitier informs her that her husband has passed away. She actually cried. The camera was rolled by the editor and director. One of the most impactful scenes in the film was that one. It was not a performance. She was finally able to release her pain. She played a tough agent in the drug-filled Hollywood industry, Miriam Poehler, in Valley of the Dolls later that year. She depicted on television the cruelty and desperation of the industry based on her personal experience. Despite the disapproval of reviewers, the movie was a commercial success. Due of her personal experience with that same darkness, her acting felt authentic. In 1962, she wed Joseph Fury, a producer. The industry didn't initially trust him either. He supported her and assisted in her reconstruction, despite their suspicion that he shared Manoff's political views. Belinda was their daughter's name. The stability she had never experienced before came from their long-lasting marriage. She received a second Oscar nomination for The Landlord in 1969. Her portrayal of a prejudiced Long Island mother was startling considering her own progressive views. Although she claimed to have modeled the role on members of her own family, critics expressed surprise that she consented to utter such terrible things on TV, demonstrating how racism may go undetected. She was not scared to take on challenging jobs, even if they caused discomfort, as the performance demonstrated. Finally, on March 29, 1976, she took home an Oscar for Shampoo. Her age was 50. The crowd was astounded by her speech. "I really must have wanted this," she added. "Why else would I don an ancient bridal gown?" She had spent years lying about her age. The mayor assisted her in updating her license to reflect her new birth year when she returned to Hollywood in 1964. Her performance in Shampoo, which lasted only 18 minutes, was among the shortest Oscar-winning performances ever. But it was crucial. She claimed that she felt as though she had no adversaries for the first time. She received another nomination for the role of Jewish refugee in Voyage of the Damned that same year. She found the story to be personal. Her family had also seen the horrors of the Holocaust, and she was Jewish. Even though she barely appeared in 8% of the movie, her performance was strong enough to get her another Oscar nomination. She took home another Emmy for The Neon Ceiling in 1972. That movie marked a sea change. She began offering suggestions for the plot and direction. Although it created tension on set, it demonstrated her readiness for more. It marked the beginning of her serious consideration of directing, and it was her second Emmy victory. Even though she was 52 by 1977, she continued to act younger. She starred in the film Airport 77. like the resentful, wealthy woman who made fun of everyone. Her portrayal of an irate, forgotten woman was a reflection of the way older actors were viewed. According to one critic, her character's punching incident was a vicious instance of overt misogyny. It demonstrated how cruel the profession could be to older women. She received a second nomination for The Swarm in 1979, but the movie failed. It barely made $10 million, but it had cost $21 million. It was rated as one of the worst films ever produced by critics. At 53, Grant felt that her career would be destroyed once more by this failure. Then she turned around. After moving behind the camera, she began directing. She was given a second chance at life in Hollywood by that choice. She was going to stop waiting for approval. She was going to make her own way. Hollywood experienced a shocking event in 1980 that nobody anticipated. All of that changed when a lady stood behind the camera. She was Lee Grant. When other actresses were being pushed away, she took a risk at the age of 55. Tell Me a Riddle was her debut feature film as director. It wasn't just the acting or the tale that made it historic. It was that all of the film's writers, producers, and directors were female. America had never experienced that before. Based on a subdued, poignant tale about an elderly Jewish couple, the movie starred Oscar-winning performers Melvyn Douglas and Lila Kudrova. The actual surprise, though, was that Lee Grant had raised more than $1 million to attend. Almost no women-led enterprises received that level of funding in those days. And the film wasn't buried after it was done. Filmways Pictures acquired it, and it was even shown during the Directors' Fortnight at the Cannes Film Festival. Additionally, it took home the Edinburgh Film Festival's Best Picture and Best Actor awards. For a lot of folks, this was their first glimpse that a woman could successfully lead a big-budget movie. 6 years later, Lee Grant shattered yet another barrier. Her work on the CBS movie Nobody's Child earned her the Directors Guild of America Award in 1986. Marie Balter, a lady who was imprisoned in mental facilities for 20 years, was the real-life subject of the film. The lead, Marlo Thomas, earned an Emmy for her performance. Regarding how America handled those with mental illness, the film was brutally honest, emotive, and unvarnished. In the 51-year history of the Guild, no woman had previously won in that area, so Grant's victory garnered media attention. That occurred when she was 59. It wasn't simply her gender that won her. In a field that tends to overlook both, she triumphed as an older woman. However, this was not a simple task. She had won an Oscar in 1975 for Shampoo. That is typically thought of as the pinnacle of a career. Lee Grant, however, saw it as a dead end. She was 48. And it was already determined by Hollywood that she was too old for important parts. As she held her Oscar that evening, she became aware that she was gradually being erased. The Hollywood blacklist had already cost her 12 years of youth, from the age of 24 to 36. Then time struck once more. She even had to fabricate her age, even going so far as to have dinner with the mayor of Los Angeles in order to have her license revoked for 5 years. It was not a matter of vanity. It was about surviving. So she began again. She created her first short film from a play in which one lady speaks and the other remains mute while she was a student at the American Film Institute's Women's Directors Workshop. She fought her way back from there, but this time as a director rather than an actress. She directed HBO's When Women Kill in 1983. There was nothing like what folks had seen on television. She had access to actual inmates, such as Leslie Van Houten from the Manson family. She presented unheard-of stories. Only 12 women were among the more than 1,100 inmates on death row. She said that many of them had endured years of torture before losing it. The movie made them seem like human beings, even though it didn't attempt to justify their actions. Then, in 1985, she took an even greater chance. How did she direct What Sex Am I? A documentary on transsexual individuals. During the Reagan administration, merely mentioning the term transgender on television may result in hate mail. Nevertheless, Lee Grant did it. She filmed genuine people who were attempting to live their truths while traveling throughout the nation, including to California, Texas, and New York. According to one review, her movie felt more like it belonged in the 21st century than the 80s. Someone else described it as painfully honest. The portal had been opened by Lee Grant 5 years before Paris was on fire. She produced Down and Out in America, another HBO movie, in 1986. Using Reagan's policies, this one addressed poverty. She demonstrated how Minnesota farmers lose hundreds of farms every week. Thousands at a time, she documented manufacturing workers whose jobs were being moved abroad. Even threats of death were made against her. The Academy, however, took notice. The movie was tied for an Oscar for Best Documentary Feature. It became the first Oscar for HBO. This made her the only Oscar-winning performer to win a documentary directing award as well. Even now, no one else has done that. Her television work was as impactful. She had previously received 2 Emmys, one for The Neon Ceiling in 1971 and another for Peyton Place in 1966. The subject of the second one was a suburban mother who ends her life. The type of tale that TV often told was not this one. During the 1980s and 1990s, she continued to receive Emmy nominations, notably for her directing. It wasn't simply her superb TV work. She was demonstrating the potential of TV. She directed the domestic abuse documentary Battered in 1989. She spoke with abusers and victims. Nothing she said was sugar-coated. Lawmakers, trainings, and classrooms all used the movie. According to People magazine, it demonstrated that she was an incredible filmmaker. She received formal thanks for her efforts in 1990 from the LA County and the New York City Council. In 1989, she received the inaugural Lifetime Achievement Award from Women in Film. Her most startling incident, however, occurred in 2023. In an interview, she casually disclosed that she was born in 1925 and was 97 and a half years old. She had been claiming to be younger for many years. Wikipedia and IMDb were also incorrect. She claimed that the reporter needed to be reminded to act astonished because they didn't even react sufficiently. In actuality, when she was removed from the blacklist in 1964, she had begun to fabricate her age. Despite being 39 at the time, she claimed to be in her early 30s. She lied to friends, casting directors, and agents alike. In order to maintain the lie, she once said that she had to coach others around her. Vanity wasn't the issue. The goal was to find employment. Later research revealed that compared to men their age, women over 50 received 78% less roles. I Said Yes to Everything, her 2014 book, detailed her entire experience surviving the 1952 to 1964 blacklist. Before the House Un-American Activities Committee, she declined to testify against her husband. She was prohibited for that. No TV shows, no movie parts. She had a job in theater. Accepted teaching positions, while her spouse created screenplays using fictitious names. She claimed that the trauma was so severe that she was unable to recall people's names afterwards. She seemed to have tuned out things in order to survive. But she continued. According to her, it was like dancing on a pin to survive during that period. By 2025, she will be 99 years old, still intelligent and active. A significant celebration for her 100th birthday is already being planned by Turner Classic Movies for October 31st. In 1951, she began performing on Broadway. 74 years have passed. Her trademark red lipstick and gray hair are still seen in her social media posts today, and she continues to be the oldest living director in Hollywood.